One, two, three, and we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my show, Classical Christian Thought. If anybody is awake at this late hour in this time zone, Eastern United States, or anywhere else, if you could give me a sound verification, I would greatly appreciate it. In any case, this show is entitled, or this episode is entitled, Why I'm a Fan of Dr. Gavin Ortlund. I have been asked this question. Thank you so much, Pete, for verifying the audio from Australia. Wow, God bless you. I've been asked quite a bit in recent months for why I like Dr. Gavin Ortlund, who is popular today. But if you have not heard of him or seen him, he's a Protestant scholar. He is a Baptist, and he has a YouTube channel and a podcast called Truth Unites. He just recently debated Trent Horn with Pints with Aquinas. They had a set up in Steubenville, Ohio. You can go on YouTube and view that debate. It was a live debate. I'm still not done listening to it yet. I've listened to about 75% of it. But if you haven't heard of Dr. Gavin Ortlund, you probably should. He's got a number of published books out. And some people have been troubled by my positive comments on Ortlund. This is going back now at least a year. And this is coming. These questions are coming from usually Catholics and Orthodox, who are scratching their heads as to why I've even come close to promoting some of his material, and they're wondering, why is Eric, as a Catholic, promoting this or sharing it or recommending it for us to think about. And even recently, I was told that I'm giving mixed signals, as if, perhaps I'm being convinced by the work of Dr. Ortlund to become a Protestant. So it's been in the works for me to, make some sort of a live explanation for some of my articles and the things that I've said on Facebook about Dr. Ortlund and his work. By the way, I've developed an online friendship with Dr. Gavin. I'll call him Gavin from here on out. And he's been a very, very good, kind, charitable interlocutor on the issue of Protestantism and Catholicism. So I'm speaking as a friend of his, but also as somebody. Even if I was not a friend of his, I would say the same things that I'm going to say on this episode. Before I continue, if you could like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and share this with your friends and on social media to help me gain a bigger audience. That always helps. But let me get right into it. So I have four basic reasons for why. Oh yeah, Corey. Byram, thanks for coming on here. I don't expect anybody to stay. You could put me back on in the morning or tomorrow when you're driving during the day. Let me explain why I'm up at this time. Like I said before, this has been in the works. I've planned this before, and I was hoping to do it days ago. But this particular week, my sons have all had a lot of homework. So they all attend a classical school, and so they have long assignments, and so sometimes I'm up late helping my son with his Latin homework, and another son with his Greek mythology homework, and then just this evening, I was helping my son with an essay that he's doing on Pericles and the Golden Age of Athens. So and we were trying to get all the typos out and trusting Microsoft Editor, but you can't trust it. So and I've got to have it. I've got to have the paper printed out to read it. And so I was, him and I were just trying to really fix the punctuality, the grammar of his essay. So it drug on. So this is why I'm coming on late. As a father of 6 boys, I work full time. Uh, we have nightly prayers. We have dinner. I mean, there's just so much, and there's not enough time. So, and I really wanted to get this video out. So I made a sacrifice to come on here at this late hour. I'm hoping I won't be too long. So that's my apologia for why I'm up at this time. So let me go into my 4 reasons. So the first reason why I'm a fan of Dr. Ortlund is he is extremely well studied. For the last 10, 15 years, I started getting heavily into Protestant theology in 2005 when I was a Protestant. And I can't, even surveying the landscapes that I dwelt in all those years, studying Protestantism or Catholicism, and meeting many learned individuals, I've never come across somebody as well studied in history, um, who I could have a conversation with, like Dr. Gavin Ortlund. Of course, I knew of authors who, that Gavin himself would look up to, like Herman Bavinck, and some of the historical figures like John Jewell, other, just other Protestant thinkers who've written in the past that often get overlooked by Catholics. But you don't come across a guy like Gavin very often, who is approachable. He's made himself available to the public, and he's able to have conversations about Protestantism, history, Catholicism, and the fathers, who's as well educated. He knows, he's read history. He knows the fathers. He's done his due diligence in studying some of the top scholarship of the day, from Catholic scholars and Protestant scholars and Orthodox scholars. And that's something that as a Catholic, I didn't really see a lot of that in the major players in the Protestant world. I'll give one name because I don't think there's anything wrong with throwing him in here. Is Dr. James White, for example, who he is well studied, but he comes with a little bit of a wild eye, if you know what I mean. Uh, he's got an axe to grind. That becomes more clear than anything in his presentations. But Gavin seems to explore history like a botanist would explore a garden. He goes in there seeing what's beautiful, what's good, what's true. And although we have a great amount of disagreement over interpretations, I could see that he is perceptive, and he's taking a lot of time to take the best notes. So he's extremely well studied, and to see that in a Protestant apologist, you need to commend it, because we've been dealing with, and again, I'm not going to name names other than Dr. James White. We've been dealing with a lot of poor scholars in this department on the Protestant side. In my opinion, in the last 15, 20 years, I haven't seen many people directly engaging the church fathers, Catholicism, Orthodoxy, even criticizing his own evangelical context and society. I've not seen a lot of that. So my first reason is he's extremely well studied. The second reason is he's extremely charitable. He abides by the New Testament ethic for religious discourse and argument. This is something that's extremely hard to come by in every group, in every denomination, especially in this age group. In the younger kids, it's you're going to see more of the foolishness. But Gavin, I take him in his 30s, maybe late 20s. He's still a younger guy, and he's exhibiting the ethics that we find, all the one another's that you find in the New Testament. Love one another, be kind to one another, be long suffering with one another, have mercy with one another. Those things, you could see them in the way that he engages with others online. I pray that continues. So that's the second reason, and it's rare to see that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the ethics of the New Testament when it comes to this, to religious discourse and religious debate and argument. My third reason for being a fan of Dr. Ortlund is because of this background that we have going on in the Catholic world today. Catholics often underestimate the force of Protestant arguments. And this is where I get a lot of criticism from people. I have no intention of returning to the Protestant world. And for reasons that I'll share in a little bit, that's abundantly clear. Some of the recent books I've written are entirely against where Protestantism would want the truth to be. So this has nothing to do with me looking to try and return to the Protestant world. But one of the things that I knew when I made the transition from Protestantism to Catholicism is that a lot of the mainstream efforts put out there by, with all due respect, because they do a lot of great work for the front lines and getting people in the door and things like that, is Catholic Answers, for example. A lot of the material that Catholic Answers puts out there really gets people interested. It gets them looking into the issues. It'll get them, studying further, and that's great. But if you're looking at Catholic Answers to answer all of your questions and to deal with all of the best Protestant apologetics out there, you're probably gonna be disappointed, especially if you're reading, like if you're really reading the best of the best on both sides. Well, I was doing that when I became a Catholic. In fact, I was a Protestant inquirer on Catholic Answers forum, and I got a lot of warnings from the moderators and admins on the forum there because I kept trying to, bring the strong arguments, and maybe I had displayed some irritation at how some of the Catholics there were not understanding what I was saying. But it didn't seem like they were prepared to answer all of my objections. So I had to go elsewhere to get my questions answered. I was just talking to somebody on the phone the other night who's going to be baptized in the Catholic Church this coming Easter Vigil. And when he heard me say this to him, he's like, "You know what, Eric? You're absolutely right. All of my difficult questions, I've had to go further than Catholic Answers." And that's not surprising. I don't think that Catholic Answers would be surprised by that. Their whole mission is to sort of be out there on the front lines. So I don't expect them to be, super duper equipped with how to answer all the toughest objections. It'd be nice if they were, but I'm not going to be disappointed that they're not, because it suits their purpose for what they're doing, is to be kind of on the surface of things. But in any case, this third reason I'm mentioning here is that Catholics tend to misunderstand what Protestants believe, and Gavin does a great job of giving clarity to this issue, to certain issues. I'll give you an example: justification by faith. So many Catholics believe that Protestants think that all you need to do is believe and trust in the blood, and easy. It's so easy. No pressure after that. You don't have to do good works in order to be saved. You don't have to, be meticulously holy. All the pressure's gone. Christ did it all. If I sin, I'm forgiven. If I do the right thing, which I'm sure I will or I should, then that's great too. And that's really what I just described there is called easy believism or greasy grace. And that's not what any of the historic confessional Protestants believed. It's not in any of the founding magisterial confessions coming out of the continental reforms and um, the reform in the British Isles with the Church of England. None of them were saying something like that. So the fact that you have evangelicals today who espouse that, and trust me, I know that there are evangelical scholars who have upheld that. I'm thinking of the lordship controversy that started in the late '80s with Charles Ryrie, Roy B. Zook, um, and some other, especially over there at DTS, Dallas Theological Seminary. Um, John MacArthur, a famous Protestant pastor who still to this day is a pastor over there on the West Coast in California. He picked up his pen and wrote some very good books answering that easy believism heresy that crept into the American evangelical scene. The first book that he wrote was The Gospel According to Jesus. If you read that book, even as a Catholic, you and without knowing that John MacArthur wrote the book, you will be surprised at what he says in that book. He also wrote another book called The Gospel According to the Apostles, and that's also another great book on what the apostolic preaching was: repentance, conversion, and things like that. His soteriology is off. Don't get me wrong. Okay, he still has problems in his soteriology, but he's not teaching easy believism, and he's just following what the original reformers were saying on both the Lutheran front, the Calvinistic front, and on the Anglican front. And MacArthur points that out. He cites Luther a bunch because Luther is often thought by Protestants to believe that, all you have to do is be a snow-covered dung heap, and that's it. Trust in the blood, sin all you want. And Luther was a sensational writer, so there's a lot of things that he said at times that could give off, the wrong impression. But when he was serious enough, he never espoused this easy believism that I'm describing here. And if you don't believe me, just talk to Lutherans who are all in agreement with on these issues. You look at the best of the Lutheran scholars out there. Read the Book of Concord. I mean, that's really what you need to do is pick up the Book of Concord. Read Luther's smaller and larger catechism. I mean, Catholics have not done a lot of reading, and I'm not trying to paint a broad brush that every Catholic is not doing this, but it's quite often that we see this, that Protestants don't understand what Protestants teach. Sola Scriptura is another one. We just saw a debate, between Gavin and Trent Horn. There are some differences on how to understand what Sola Scriptura is. Most people in the crowd are still thinking that it means that, and even when you clarify what Sola Scriptura means, it's often easily reverted back to, they believe that the Bible is the only source of Christian doctrine, which is not true. Even though I will admit Luther did say some things that made it sound that way, especially when he was forming his views. But Gavin is doing a great job of basically putting Catholics on the spot with their misunderstandings. And I like that. I like that because I don't want to be the Catholic who's constantly saying, no, this is not what Protestants believe. This is what they believe. Or this is what the confessions have said. This is what traditional Lutherans have said. This is what traditional Methodists have taught. This is what the confessional Presbyterians have thought, and their confessions of faith. This is what the Baptists have traditionally taught. It's nice to see a Protestant, answering for his own side. So that's a third reason. The fourth reason I'm a fan of Dr. Ortlund is I think he shares a lot of my own method when it comes to doing apologetics and religious dialogue. Some people wonder why in my articles and my posts I give all this strength and recognition to opposing sides. Sometimes I've done it with the Coptics, I've done it with the Orthodox, I've done it with Protestantism. And it really throws people off. And somebody had asked me, why do you do this? I mean, Gavin is a Baptist. I had one guy in particular who he's a Catholic, but he's leaning towards Orthodoxy. He's a far right wing dude, and he's like, dude, Gavin is a Baptist, And I said, that's one of the reasons why I have a different view of Gavin than other people. I After talking with him, a bunch. Yeah, I've talked with him face to face through Zoom once. I've Facebook messaged him quite a bit. What I envision in him is not the typical, Southern Baptist evangelical who is, got all, the only book he's really reading are the Bible and Protestant commentaries on the Bible. That's not what I get from Gavin. What I get from Gavin is he's almost like he gives me C.S. Lewis echoes. See, he's very appreciative of history. Um, he recognizes the good in many of all the eras in the church, from the early going into the Middle Ages up to the medieval period. But he's got some criticism. He doesn't think that the church is infallible. That C.S. Lewis didn't believe the church was infallible. That's one of the reasons why he never became a Catholic, was because he couldn't envision himself joining the Catholic Church and vowing to always believe what the Catholic Church taught, because he didn't believe the church was per se infallible, intrinsically, perpetually. So he had a lot of, critical comments on, contemplative iconography. Um, I've heard that he even criticized gazing at the crucifix too long, or it could generate superstition. Maybe on that particular point, it's not so controversial, but definitely on our Mariology and on the doctrine of the papacy, um, C.S. Lewis thought that those were heresies. So uh, he doesn't come across to me as somebody like a Southern Baptist, like a Paul Washer, for example. You know, Gavin comes across as somebody who's immersed in history. If you point him to a certain father, he's not going to just disavow him. Oh, that was just a man. He's going to look at the father. He's going to read it. He's going to look into the scholarship. He's going to he does his due diligence. So I think that's one of the reasons why I have a different picture of Gavin than other people. Is when you start to talk to him and get clarifications, you could see that he's, like I said, he's like a botanist in a garden. He wants to learn. He's got his own views. He's strong and reserved in his Protestant convictions. I don't want to make that. I don't want to mistake that. And of course, I think that those are wrong. I disagree with them, but I like the way that he is open to learning. So this leads to the fourth reason is he matches my style, which is I allow my opponents, and I know I'm not a big debater, but those of you who have listened to me in the over the years. You saw me try to do a debate with Jay Dyer. I did a couple of debates with Father Patrick Ramsey, the Eastern Orthodox priest over in the UK. I did a few debates with Craig Trulia. There might be some other ones out there, but you see what I try to do is I allow my opponent to really get the best opportunity to defend their case and their position. Whereas in rhetorically dense debates, you don't want to do that. You just want to capture the opponent and show him why he's wrong. Show him why the presentation of your opponent fails. Right? That's you're just like a junkyard dog trying to destroy, uh, you know, the baseball coming over from the kids playing baseball in the sandlot. And that's just not my style. Because, and here's why I like my opponent to have the best opportunity to defend his case, show where the strongest potential for their position exists. Okay. And here's why I want that to be the case. I want them to build the strongest fortress for their position. Here's why. If they are right and you're wrong, you have a chance that you've just afforded yourself to be convinced by truth. And if they're wrong, then I get the chance to slowly and meticulously take down the fortress in all of its dimensions. So that way my opponent can see, wow, I had the strongest fortress of my position up, and we just saw this thing go down all the way. I have nothing else to say. I have got to go back and think about this, right? Well, when you're quick and you're trying to cut people off and you're interrupting them and you want to take the argument in a direction where you think you're strong, you want to get your opponent away from where he's strong. These are the debates you see in some quarters today. That's just not my style, and I see that Gavin shares that mindset. And that's why I really like I really like him as a person, and I like what he's doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I disagree with his positions on sola scriptura, on ecclesial fallibility, and some of the cleaning up that he does of what he thinks is wrong throughout the centuries. But these 4 reasons are why I'm a fan of his. And even if I wasn't a friend of his, I'd still be a fan of his. So I hope that clarifies something for some of my listeners who, especially those who've expressed some puzzlement as to what I'm doing when I share his stuff or say he's got a strong point here, because part of allowing your opponent to build his fortress is to use your eyes to see the strength of it. If it's strong, you got to let the person know this is strong. This is important. That was good. This is a valuable point. This corresponds to the argument. If you're not doing that and you've got your eyes just your eyes are just purely on why you're right, why I'm right, you lose the opportunity to be corrected, number one, because if you need to be corrected, then you want to be corrected, don't you? Okay. But if you're the kind of person where it's like you just want to find the way to prove yourself right, you don't want to address the objections, you just want to prove yourself right. Well, you can do that. You can do that. You're free to do that. I'm not going to stop you. You know, I'm not in the business of trying to exterminate you if you're doing that. But don't criticize me as if I'm doing something wrong. You see, You just are not into the field of debate or field of dialogue. That's just not for you. You see? So if that's not for you, then you plot yourself elsewhere and enjoy you enjoy your own meditation in your own thinking context where there is no, you know, fair stream of analysis on opposing ends. So that's that. Those are the four reasons why I'm a fan of Dr. Gavin Ortlund. I wanted to share a PowerPoint here with the New Testament ethics and how this applies to online apologetics. Let me see if I can get the PowerPoint going here. So if I share my screen, see that now. Let me try to play from the beginning. You guys see that? Okay. So this is from this is Paul's instructions to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2 verses 22 to 26. And I take the verses that I'm going to be citing here to my audience as this is part of the New Testament ethic for how to act and behave, especially around those who are opponents or who are uncooperative. Okay. Now I know, some of the exegetes that are listening are going to say, "Well, this is instructions for a bishop. Timothy was an evangelist and a bishop. This isn't necessarily a direct statement to somebody like me." Of course, I know that, but if Paul's going to call Bishop Timothy to a certain ethic and to certain virtues, you better believe that we as laity can learn something of the species to do that and mimic it. So before I get all the criticism on misdirection here, I'm aware of the audience that Paul's writing to. Nonetheless, I think that what's being taught here is extremely relevant to everyone. So this is what Paul says to Timothy. He says, "So shun youthful passions and aim at righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call upon the Lord from a pure heart. Have nothing to do with stupid, senseless controversies. You know that they breed quarrels, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kindly to everyone, an apt teacher, forbearing, correcting his opponents with gentleness. God may perhaps grant that they will repent and come to the knowledge of the truth, and they may escape from the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will." So you see here that Paul's describing what the man of God needs to be. He can't be engaged in senseless and stupid controversies. That's not fitting for the man of God. Whatever breeds quarrels and somebody who's quarrelsome, if you know an apologist, if you know a speaker, somebody who's engaged in the social media spectrum, who's got, an influence, and they're very quarrelsome, they're rude, they're not kind to everyone, they don't forbear with their opponents, they're not apt teachers correcting with gentleness, they're not following the New Testament ethic. Let me go to the next slide here. All right. This is St. Paul's instructions to St. Titus, chapter 2, verse 2, and then 6 to 8. He says, "Bid the older men to be temperate, serious," other translations say sober, "sensible, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness. Likewise, urge the younger men to control themselves. Show yourself in all respects a model of good deeds, and in your teaching show integrity, gravity, and get this, and sound speech that cannot be censured. I like the New King James, or the King James, which says condemned. Sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that an opponent may be put to shame, having nothing evil to say of us. That's to Titus. So notice how the older men are called to temperance, they're called to sobriety, they're to be sober, which means that the lack of sobriety is wrong. Sensible, that means that being insensitive, insensible, that's not following the New Testament ethic. And notice how for young men, it's really the same thing. Men are to control them. The younger men are to control themselves, which means Paul felt the need to say this to the young because the young have a tendency to lack self-control. So we have to control ourselves as Christians. Then he says, show yourself. So this isn't something to keep private. Show yourself in all respects a model of good deeds. If you're an apologist out there, or you're following an apologist out there, or a podcaster, or an influencer who is not showing himself in all respects a model for good deeds, don't expect to be learning anything from him that would be coming from Christ. He says, show yourself in your teaching. Show, again, is not privatized. In your teaching, show integrity, gravity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned. So if you have somebody who you like, and now I'm not trying to tell you to stop listening to whoever you're listening to. Don't get me wrong here. There are, I read non-believers. I can listen to non-believers. There is a sense in which discretion is used to, fulfill that saying, eat the meat, spit out the bones. I mean, I'm not, you're going to have to use discretion here. Pray to God for wisdom and how to make discernment. But if you're really stuck on somebody, you really put yourself under their tutelage, and they don't fulfill these instructions here that Paul's talking about, the ethics of behavior. That's, they're not following the New Testament ethic. Okay, you could glean what you need from them. You could, entertain yourself by listening to a podcast or whatever, but just understand that you need to be on guard. Let me go to the next slide here. Okay, this is from St. Peter, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8 to 12. He says, finally, all of you be of one mind, have compassion for one another, love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you were called to this, that you may inherit a blessing. For he who would love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. See this? Seek peace. Let him seek peace, and not just seek peace, but pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Close quote. Again, New Testament ethic for how to use the mouth, especially when dealing with people who are against you. Not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, blessing. You know somebody who's giving you a hard time in life. Know somebody who's a big opponent of yours, who engages in evil and breaks all the ethics of the New Testament, the basic of New Testament spirituality, like I'm talking about here. Light a candle for them. Think about them in your prayers. Think about them at Mass. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right. This comes from St. James. This is the last one. He writes, who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show, again, this isn't private, Let him show by his good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. This is actually a text that Gavin pointed me to. Of course, I've read it before, but ever since he pointed to this in relation to how online influencers who are Christian are to relate and are to abide by the New Testament ethics for conversation, dialogue, religious discourse, and debate, I've taken better note of this text. Now let's go on. James says, "But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure." Listen to what James says here. The wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, then gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. So, peaceability and gentleness, willingness to yield, and being full of mercy. These are the signs that someone has the wisdom that comes from above. So if you know people out there and you find their work just absolutely entertaining and great, despite their doctrine, I'm thinking of Catholics and Orthodox who have a robust doctrine of deification, theosis, especially the Orthodox expression on the nous and the necessity of repentance and sanctity in order to know the truth. If we as Catholics and Orthodox, if we claim to have this divine energy of wisdom from above, let's just go ahead and call it that, and we're unpure, we're not peaceable, we like combat, we like to engage in internet warfare, we're rough, we're not gentle, with our opponents, with people around us, we're bitter, combative, not willing to yield. So, in other words, just kind of like pinning your opponent up against the wall, cornering somebody. And then not full of mercy in good fruits, meaning you're kind of relentless, ruthless. You just want to see somebody be insulted, have their reputation destroyed. That's not wisdom that comes from above. James says this wisdom is demonic, earthly, sensual. Okay. So, yeah. So I just wanted to go through some of the basic texts in the New Testament that describe the ethics of behavior. And I think that Gavin exemplifies this as much as I want to strongly insist that, he is an opponent to the Catholic Church. Nevertheless, Vatican II says that there's elements of truth and sanctity outside the visible bounds. When we see that, we should commend that. And for the four reasons I gave before, I call me a fan, even if I wasn't a friend, but I am a friend of his. All right. So the next thing I have is a couple of announcements. I do have 2 book plans for 2023. The first one is on divorce and remarriage in the Church Fathers. I think this is going to be extremely beneficial for Orthodox and Protestant readers, especially Protestant readers. It just seems like divorce and remarriage is so misunderstood in the Protestant world. And really fleshing out the history of this doctrine coming from the Bible and the Fathers, I think will be a tremendous help. It'll also be addressing some of the some of the rebuttals that you get from Eastern Orthodox when criticism is laid on them for their rejection of the indissolubility of marriage, or what other of them call, the ability to economically arrange, second and third marriages. Although the Orthodox discipline on marriage is much more rigorous and ascetic than we think it is. I don't want to get that twisted. But it'll also be a kind of a response to some of the rebuttals that we've seen over the years, from Catholic criticism to Eastern practice on this issue. So yeah, that book on divorce and remarriage in the Church Fathers. And the second book is entitled Catholicism and History: Classical Protestant and Orthodox Difficulties. So, meaning it's going to be addressing some of the difficulties that we see from robust confessional classical reformed objections. So I have a chapter on sola scriptura. I have a chapter on high Anglo Catholicism. I have a chapter on the early papacy in the early centuries. I have a couple of chapters on Mariology and the development of doctrine. So Assumption of Mary will come up. Immaculate Conception, some of the other dogmas that are always on the table in the Protestant Catholic dialogue. I have a chapter on transubstantiation. I have a chapter on the universality of belief. Protestants are always saying, "Oh, well, you guys say it's always been believed everywhere, going all the way back to the first century." I have an article for the Orthodox on the addition of filioque to the creed, consequences, implications. What can we get from that? I have a chapter on the issue of delayed communion from infancy to the age of reason in the Latin Rite in the Catholic Church. How bad is that? Is it a falsification of Catholicism? What can we say? I have an essay on purgatory and purgation. And so that's going to be addressing, historic Protestant objections as well as some of the Orthodox as well. And that'll be later this year, 2023. And then the last thing after those announcements is I just wanted to share with you what I'm reading. Some of you guys asked me. I get questions in private chats quite a bit. So, first thing I'm going to share with you, I'm reading is From Plato to Christ. This is by Louis Marcos. This is subtitled How Platonic Thought Shaped Christian Faith. I think this is a vitally important book for Christians to read. If you want to understand the means, the intellectual means, instruments, dressing, whatever you want to call it, that God used when formulating Christian doctrine into a way that man can understand. God made man rational, and he brought the fullness of times at a time where rationality had a certain economy, and Platonism played a lot. It played a huge role in formulating and dressing up what Christian doctrine was. And so I think this is a real good book for people to read. Second book I am reading is called The Bible and the Priesthood, Priestly Participation in the One Sacrifice for Sins. This is by a Dominican author, Father Anthony Giambrone. And this is, I've been very interested in the issue of the priesthood, Old New Testament priesthood, and how this relates to the Protestant Catholic dialogue. So I'm reading this. I don't have a full review on it yet. So I'm working my way through. But as you know, I've written a book on Melchizedek and its relation to the New Covenant, Last Supper. So this is a topic that extremely interests me. I have another book on the priesthood. It's called The Catholic Priesthood by Father Lane. I forget the first name, but it's coming in the mail. I'm also going to read that. I'll review it. The next book is it's one of these older books, so can't see the title in front, so I'm going to have to open it up. This is called The Athanasian Creed by J.N.D. Kelly. These are the Paddock lectures in the early 1960s. They were transcribed. Of course, many people know who J.N.D. Kelly is. He's an Anglican patristic scholar, a phenomenal one. And this book is completely on the Quincunque, the Athanasian Creed. If you don't know what that is, it's a longer version of the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed that was used and developed in the West, probably not written by a Saint Athanasius himself, but it's a robust doctrine of the Trinity and how it was used, its early occurrences in the Latin West. Um, it really helps understand, especially like how deep the Filioque way was understood in the venerable tradition of the West. The next book is How to Keep from Losing Your Mind. This is a book. Okay, so the subtitle is um, Educating Yourself Classically to Survive Cultural Indoctrination. So if you're one of these guys that, you feel kind of like you've not really caught up on how you should have been educated. You you've never been a big reader, or maybe you have, but your reading has been so concentrated in, you know, abstract doctrine. The world has kind of passed you by and you're worried you kind of don't know how to navigate the world in the real main spectrum. This is a really good book to help you understand the classical mind. And I'll have to thank um Steve, Stephanus Augustine on Facebook. He's a personal friend. He's the one who got me really big into classics, and so this is a book I recommend for people who are new to it and want to understand how they can develop a mind that's informed by classical thought. And it's just a phenomenal book. So the next series of books I have, they're all from the CUA, Catholic University of America Press, on the Fathers of the Church series. So for Lent, I've been going through the sermons of Saint Cesareus of Arles. In fact, if you want to see some really cool Lenten meditation, go to my Facebook, my most recent post on the redemptive death of Jesus and Saint Cesareus's thoughts on it. They're just marvelous. It's um, just some beautiful stuff. These are his sermons, so I'm trying to work my way through them for Lent. What a great man, an author. He was a monk. Um, he went through monasteries, eventually became a bishop and an archbishop over like 70 churches in Arles in the West. So another Western Latin father worthy of reading. The next one I have, this one is a translation of Nicetas of Remisiana and Simplicius Severus. These are Latin fathers who they also wrote um, on various doctrines, a lot of them on Pelagianism, soteriology, monasticism, instructions for monks and for cloisters, and um, just monastic method. There's a lot of great things in these books. So yeah, and then there's Prosper of Aquitaine and Vincent de Lorenz in here. Probably won't read the section on Vincent because I've read Vincent in other books already. um so here's another one. This is by the CUA has translated some of the saints of Spain. They call them the Iberian fathers, to the Iberian Peninsula. Um, if you want to get some, uh, if you want to read some really cool stuff from the Spanish Church in the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries, pick up this volume. It's volume 2, actually, of the Church of the Iberian Fathers. This is Braulio of Saragossa and Fructuosus of Braga. I actually came across some commentary on Melchizedek in Braulio, and I didn't add it to my book Melchizedek, because then I'd have to make it like into another edition. Just not enough space to avoid all the new formatting. But I wish I would have read this before I finished the Melchizedek book. I certainly would have put him in there, on Melchizedek and how it relates to transubstantiation. Here's the first volume of the Iberian Fathers in the West, again of Spain. This is Martin of Braga, Pastiasius of Dumium, and Leander of Seville. I think he was the uncle of Isidore of Seville. So this is on, some of these are commentaries on the sayings of the fathers, the Egyptian monks, and other things are like instructions on Easter and how monks should abide by certain methods, to the training of nuns, training of men in monasteries. But also they touch on just a number of other practices from the early Western fathers. It's just, I love reading the West. I love also reading the East. As everybody knows, I've spent a lot of time reading the Eastern Fathers for the Filioque book and for the Papacy book, and the book on rebaptism. So I'm trying to, balance it out, read both East and West. So that's a wrap. I think we're at 56 minutes here. This is longer than I wanted it to be, but at least it's under an hour. So thank you all for coming to listen. I won't be doing any Q&A here because it's late. But if you could pray for me, again, like, share, subscribe, do all that to help me out. We'll see each other next time. And I actually have another surprise for subscribers to my channel and readers of my Facebook and readers of my blog, pretty much everybody who watches or reads me. But that surprise will not come until the day after Lent, because I don't feel right in sharing it now during Lent, when we should be inculcating more voluntary penance and suffering. And so that's going to have to wait until April 7th. So until then, God bless you guys. Leave any comments you'd like, as long as you be peaceable. I'll try to get to questions throughout the forthcoming days if you leave them in the comments. All right. God bless you.